This video continues on after part 1 video, and it focuses more on the fact you're locked out and can't get into your router. And then the video will expand a little more on how to keep other people from getting into your router and changing its configuration. Users, you notice that my doobie-doo user, if you double click on it, the allowed address is only that address. Only that address can access this router because of this parameter I put in here. So it just so happens that's outside the normal parameters of the router. Therefore, anybody logged into the router remotely or locally will not have this address because this address is outside of the bandwidth of the router configuration. Therefore, I have to have that exact address or I can't access the router through the IP address. This is why it's so important that if you're fooling around here and you leave your Mac server, if you're leaving your Mac server enabled for the Winbox or anything else, then people can just slide right in here and they just defeated that one purpose you had to keep them out. So always make sure that when you're finished with all your configurations and you've backed up everything, that you, last but not least, disable all of the Winbox servers, all the Mac servers. That way nobody can sneak in around your protections. Earlier we mentioned the fact that a user configuration could determine who can access the router configuration panel. So here we have the station open up in Winbox and we're looking at the home AP screen, and down here you see that the DHCP server is enabled and it serves between address 8810 and 88254. And that means it's going to translate so that each device thinks he's on the internet by using these virtual internet addresses. If we take a look at our system users, we were bragging about how this is going to keep people out. But guess what? It doesn't keep people out in this default configuration because it's between 10 and 254. So anybody can pick up that 122 by spoofing. So what we got to do is change this to something outside of that range. Let's make it 9. If it's 9, we apply and say OK. Then in fact we will be outside the DHCP server range, and anyone connecting to my router can only get IP addresses via this DHCP server. So if this is number 9, 88.9, then he's outside of the range. Nobody else can get this number. I have to manually enter it into my computer as shown in previous videos on how you change your IP address on Windows 10. So hopefully this helps to explain why we're using this feature and why you got to make sure the feature is outside of this bandwidth range of IP addresses. Okay, let's assume you've pretty much have your modem configured, your router configured the way you want it, but there's a couple things you need to look at closely. Under IP address, you got to look at services. These services here, unless you actually need to access your modem using one of these services, you need to disable it. These are not services that other people can use on your router. These are the services only to access the configuration part of your router. So you want to disable all of these. The way you do that is you select one, you can activate it or you can deactivate it. So Winbox and www is the only ones that I leave activated. So that's an important service list. You're reducing the threat area where people can get into your router by eliminating these services if you don't need them. The other thing to be concerned with has to do with missing firewall rules. So if you click on IP, come down here and click on Firewall. You need to see a list of rules. Here, these are the default rules from the factory. Absolutely, you have to have firewall rules. If you don't have any firewall rules, then you need to fix that right away. The only way I know how to do that is come down here under System, Reset Configuration. I'm going to keep my user configuration. I'm going to reset the configuration of the router. I'm going to say yes. Now the router is rebooting. I can connect via my MAC address. And I'm going to say, okay, I want to keep these. So now I'll go back and look at my IP rules. Firewall rules. You notice I do have rules now. What else got changed here in the process? Well, let's see. Let's look at our users for a minute. Still have our users. So that didn't change. Quick set. Let's go to home AP. And that didn't change. So it looks like nothing else changed to speak of. Look at my tools, Mac servers. That changed. So the Mac servers changed. What else changed? The IP services. Ooh, they changed too. So you gotta be careful when you do that restore configuration, you're changing these various things. But you did get your firewall rules back. So this concludes what happens if you don't have firewall rules, you need to install them. You need to go back through all your configuration parameters, make sure nothing else changed besides the ones I've listed here. There is another way to access your router, but that's only if you have your IP address set up as required by the router. In my case, it's got to have this 122 address. So the other way to do it is use your browser. So you start up your browser, and you can't get connected right now. I'm not connected to the internet. But just go up here and you type the address 192.168.84.1. That's the address of the router itself. And if I try to connect, put in the correct credentials, you notice I can connect to the router. Everything looks totally different. We got web configuration, which is sort of like the Winbox, but it's not exactly the same. The point is you could get in here if you had to, and you could make some configuration changes if you did not have Winbox available. I just wanted to show you that things look a lot different once you go this route. For example, reset the configuration, everything looks different. So I just wanted you to know there's another way to access in case you're in some situation where you've lost your Winbox, it's become corrupted or something and you can't use it. You can always use any of your browsers to access the router as long as you have the proper credentials and you set up on the proper IP address. So that concludes this video section. So this concludes this lesson on accessing the Microtech router using the Winbox program.